Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Carole Murko and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Carole Murko and it's lovely to have you join me. Now today, we're going to be talking about 3 principles of living: love, eat and heal. And that's something that sounds a wonderful way to live our life, where we can find that balance to enjoy living well and making the most of our life. My guest today is Carole Murko, a certified health coach, mindset expert, Neurochange solutions consultant, qigong instructor, and founder of Love, Eat, Heal. Carole believes that love will save the world. That's a wonderful thought, isn't it? After 15 years in a competitive dog-eat-dog environment in the late 90s, she created a company called Dodo Unlimited, using the dodo bird to represent "Don't let your individualism become extinct. Dare to be different." When her body started to show signs of imbalance and some major life setbacks occurred, she knew something needed to change. Through her own learnings and experience, Carole works to help others feel happiness, joy, wholeness, freedom, and love through the principles of love, eat, heal. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Carole. It's so lovely to finally get to meet you. We've had this interview scheduled on and off for quite some months now, so I'm really delighted that you've been able to join me today for the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Well, it's just so delightful to be here, and I truly believe that there are no accidents, so we are meant to be here today speaking, and for whatever reason the stars wanted it to be now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was thinking about that before we came on air, and I was thinking, we first had one scheduled probably last year, it could have even been, and then both of us had to chop and change each time. And then I thought, well, there's a reason for that. And so I totally agree that now is the time. So love, eat, heal is what we're going to be talking about today. But first of all, I'd like you to just give the listeners a little bit about your background, because you have made some changes in your life, and then a little bit about what a mindset expert is and what you do for Neurochange solutions, which is all part of what you do.
Okay, well, great. So I've definitely had sometimes I think I've had many lives in this one life, given the variety of careers that I've had. And it's great to be on the podcast with women over 50. So I don't have to tell anybody that, I'm not 30. And so this is why it's, so I, graduated from college, and at that time, everybody was going into financial services, and there really wasn't, or retail, but it wasn't like the landscape is today, right? Where, now look at everybody's creating their own online 7-figure businesses. We had narrower choices. And so I went to Wall Street and knew pretty much from the get-go that it wasn't aligned with my soul, but it wasn't clear where to go, right? Even back then, people weren't practicing yoga the way they practice today. Qigong and yoga and meditation, I knew nobody who
No, and actually if you did, they were sort of thought to be a little bit alternative and hippie or whatever. Yeah, let's not.
Like,
It's a
you
bit
know,
woo woo.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, none of this stuff was available to us, at least, at least in the mainstream. And so I kind of lived that life of, okay, this is what's here. I'm going to do it. It was a fascinating time because, in the United States, I started college in 1979 when, the Equal Rights Amendment hadn't been passed, right? And I went to an all-women's college. And so it was really interesting that my era was very much focused on, getting a man's job, right? It wasn't about the divine feminine. That wasn't anything that anybody would have uttered back in the 80s. And it felt like that's where I had to go. But I mean, I fought a sexual harassment suit. It was pre Anita Hill. And then that's how moved from New York to Boston because it was the only job I could get because you sort of, how do you explain why you're unemployed, right?
Mm,
Like
mm,
in a male dominated industry.
mm, mm,
So you had to kind of go where there was an opportunity. And so I evolved through that career and I was stayed way too long, but I was in that career for about 15 years. And then I left and ultimately got into the next career was interior design. And the reason, and I thought if I could sell complex fixed income strategies to corporate 50 treasurers, I could sell curtains to housewives, right? I was like, no, that was apparently like a very different like audience and a different skill set, right? And I
Well,
mean,
it
I
would have
did
been
quite
quite the
well,
extreme
total
from,
extreme.
financial, where it's all cut and dried, really,
Yeah.
and then going to the other extreme of interior design, which is so creative and individual, isn't it?
And very subjective, right? Like so and I didn't understand the just the psychology of, the relationships between husbands and wives and all this other stuff. And anyhow, but I ended up getting hired to do a house in the country. And it was this lovely 11-bedroom house, shingle style, stone foundation. And it was this gentleman who hired me. And anyway, long story short, we fell in love, and that's where I live now.
Okay.
So, so there's sometimes we end up in careers for reasons that we don't know until the thing happens, right?
Mm,
oh, I needed to do this career to fall in love with my soulmate.
mm,
And so that was pretty fantastic and still is. That's where I am. We're living here. I helped raise his, he was divorced and I was involved in raising his 3 kids. And so I got to experience being a mom without birthing children, so I
yeah,
had a
yeah.
hand in raising 3 kids who are now in their late 20s and early 30s, and they've turned into amazing adults. And it's just wonderful to have had access to raising littles and
Mm,
having an
mm,
impact on their lives. And so I was a big cook. So the next thing I ended up doing was as a result of a workshop I took called Getting to Next, which was designed to help women in transitions figure out, what their core values were. So I took this program and I left with my core values were at the time, I love my family, I love to entertain, and I love to cook. And I thought, well, gosh, what do I do with that? Those are big things, but eh, they didn't present, a path, right, that I could
mm,
imagine. And I grew up outside of New York City, um, half Italian, so in a 3-generation household with my Italian grandparents, so my mom's parents. So cooking was always a big deal, and so I understood why cooking would have shown up. But I had this thing that, like, nobody needs another Italian American cookbook, right? Like there seem to like to be so many out there.
mm,
And so I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. And then all of a sudden we were out to dinner at some friends' house, and the woman was from Vienna, Austria, and the husband was from Strasbourg, France. And the dinner was really a compilation of their heritage. She had these beautiful cross-stitched Austrian linens on the table, and her tableware was all Austrian, and the wines were all French, and the meal was a combination of French and Austrian. And it was actually Jim, my husband, who said, he calls me Miss Murky. Miss Murky, this is it. You should focus on helping people tell the stories around their family recipes and the traditions, so that they don't become lost. And
mm,
so I
mm,
spent the next 10 years creating Heirloom Meals, which was a storytelling platform where I interviewed people about their family recipes, stories, and tips. And I had a radio show, an NPR radio show, and I did two nationally televised PBS specials called Heirloom Meals Thanksgiving and Heirloom Meals Christmas. And it was probably the a most amazing expression of creativity, and just this, it was really about love again, right? Love.
mm,
It's
mm,
obviously a theme
mm,
that I've now really stepped into in my business. Um, but I continued to do my interior design, and I had also gotten my real estate license out here in the country, because that everybody who moves from the city to the country doesn't know what to do, so they get their real estate license. It's so funny, right? And but I was pretty much working 7 days a week to like kind of produce
mm,
my dream. I couldn't figure out how to monetize it. And then I had little signs over the years that maybe my perfect health wasn't so perfect, but nothing was showing up in blood tests or blood pressure. I was, testing perfectly in the medical model. And then
mm,
out of the blue, I mean, we were going on vacation. We were going to Santa Fe. We were landing, and all of a sudden, I had all of these floaters in my eyes.
mm,
And it turns out that, um, you know, I ended up with an extremely rare autoimmune eye disease, and with no known cure. So I first went down the Western model, and I was a human guinea pig, right? I just was
mm,
take this drug, because they don't treat the disease, they treat the symptoms, right? So they were just
mm,
trying to
mm,
tame the inflammation, and the drugs were making me super sick. I mean, and I thought to myself, this can't be the way I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
mm, mm,
Sick from the drugs, hopeless in a way, right? I mean, the I would go in to see the doctor because I would research things and just say, "Oh, well, I read that cannabis is really great for inflammation." And she's like, "Well, you could try it, but it won't work."
mm, mm.
And
Closed mind.
yeah, so I wasn't getting the encouragement that there were any options other than what she was affording me. And then one drug they put me on made me so sick. And I called her up and I said, "Look, I'm having an allergic reaction to this drug." And she's like, "There are no known side effects to this drug." And I said, "Well, I think I might be the 0.0001% person that's having side effects.
Mm,
And I can't keep them in. I mean, I was just not well with them." And so she said to me, "If you don't stay on these drugs, you're going to go blind." And something just clicked in me. It was like
mm,
at that moment, I just knew I was never going back there. I had this download that I could heal myself.
mm, mm. Yes, and how did you go about doing that? You've tried some alternative ways, and I also want to come to the point of your what I call your 3 point philosophy, which is love, eat, heal. So I wonder if perhaps we could talk about that, because that would probably tie in with what you did to because you're looking quite healthy now. Are you, you
Oh,
know, have you
And
overcome the, yeah,
yes,
great.
yes,
Okay, well, that's good. So let's talk about love, eat, heal and how you've put that into practice in your life.
will do. So what I had discovered on the path and how I ended up creating Love, Eat, Heal is that um, healing is an inside job and that we all have the capacity to heal ourselves, but we haven't been taught, encouraged, or conditioned to believing that we can heal ourselves. And so
Mm,
once I really tuned into that, I had, when I was getting my health coaching certification, there was a woman who did a presentation, and she had said there are three things that you need to have present for healing. First, you have to believe you can. The second is you have to make radical changes. And the third is a contract that if you figure out how to heal yourself, you have to become the healer.
mm,
And so, hence why I started Love, Eat, Heal, is that through my curious exploration of ways of healing from meditation, breath work, qigong, radical change in diet, some cannabis, plant medicine, um, journaling, like all the tools, right? All of these things were all contributing, but I'd had to say the thing that contributed the most was this concept of loving myself first, which
mm,
I call self-mastery, right? It's self-mastery and understanding that we can master our thoughts. And the hierarchy of healing is you are what you think first, and then you are what you eat. So, so love yourself first, eat consciously, and then heal what needs to be healed with, an array of tools, right?
mm, mm,
And so that's how that all came together. And so the tools that I collected and the certifications, which actually don't mean as much as what, the they're like the sum of the parts, right? Is are the are greater than the individual ones. But I got my health coaching certification, and then I started studying the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he teaches meditation. But what I loved about the way he taught meditation is that he taught the biology and the neuroscience of how our brain and body work. And that
mm,
maybe because I was a finance person at one point, and because it was based in science, and because my brain has always been a little bit more logical than I don't want to say like just it liked logic, right? So, um, and I like to know the what and the why. And
mm,
so when you
mm,
know the what and the why, the how gets easier. And so I understood that our bodies are designed to heal, and and through our thoughts and through our emotions. And I will attribute most of my healing through the process of daily journaling and meditation. And what I did was I have the gene for the disease, and I know that it got turned on. And so my meditations would be I'm turning off the gene. I'm turning off the
mm,
gene and I'm seeing it reverse, right? And I would just do this every single day. And then what was the feeling that I was going to have when I was healed? And I would just imagine myself feeling free and joyful and in awe.
mm,
And bit by bit, my symptoms started going away,
mm,
and it was incredible. And I was working with a couple of functional medical doctors, a Cherokee herbalist, so I had, all of my kind of other doctors out there who were supporting me with herbs and supplements and diet suggestions and all that other stuff. So it wasn't in a vacuum that I was just doing the meditations and the
no,
thoughts, but
mm,
I really believe it was driving the healing along with doing these other things. So that's why the eat part is so important as well, because it became the notion of eating consciously. And most, at least in the United States, it feels like most of us are like, there's so much food and you just eat and you don't think and you don't chew sometimes. And,
Mm,
we're in a rush. And so it became very clear to me that understanding the energetics of food and the healing quality of different foods and just tuning into those while you're eating them and imagining that they were healing you was,
mm.
what I believe is really important. It's not to say you can't have, you know, a chocolate chip cookie or something, yummy. It's just that it's just to be conscious that you're having that chocolate chip cookie, right? You're not just stuffing it down and
No, and probably savouring it because
yes.
um, we wanted to cut back on all those processed type foods. And but the other thing is that we do, that's something we've sort of grown up with, say cookies and cakes and things like that. They're yummy, but healthy food can be just as delicious. It's just that we have to get our mindset around that. And as you say, it's about savouring the flavours and the tastes and making that meal a moment rather than, just trying to fit it in and this will do. I think, when you've got, even if you're not unwell, uh, or if you are, you take the medicine that you're given, the tablet or whatever, and you think that's going to fix everything. But if you're not changing your lifestyle, you're not changing your way of thinking, well, it's, obviously the medicine will help, but it's not going to change the real problems that, it all stems from. Because I feel that with you talking about the meditation and the other areas, there's a calmness that comes. And I know that, for example, Olivia Newton-John, she had breast cancer and she didn't really want to go down the traditional route, but she always promoted that calm, feeling of calm and tuning in with yourself. And that must help with the healing.
Oh, absolutely. Because here's some statistics that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday. And statistically, 70% of those thoughts create the hormones of stress.
Mm,
And stress knocks the body and brain out of balance, right? Out of homeostasis. It puts us in fight or flight, which, was a very adaptive system that was designed for humans to, you know, when we were needed to run, fight, or hide, we did it. But in modern society, we have shelter. We have grocery stores with aisles of food, right? So we're not out with a spear trying to to kill our food, or we're not nomads, moving across the land looking for um, crops. And we're also, we have shelter, we have electricity, we have heat. So the things that we would have needed to get into like fight or flight for no longer exist. So guess what we do? We create stress by thought alone.
mm,
And so by recognizing that and trying to tune into those unconscious thoughts, because knowing that we have that many thoughts per day, you also have to, if you know you have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, most of those thoughts are unconscious.
mm,
And so that is probably where the stress is coming from. So
mm,
unconscious thoughts that, maybe when you were little, something happened, like, a fender bender, or you didn't get picked for a team, you felt rejection, like, and then you unknowingly develop these little habits, right, to protect your tender heart. And
mm,
then as
mm,
you evolve through life, those habits become ingrained in you. And so and we're super unaware of them until you have to become aware of them, because you know that if you don't change some of your thoughts, if you don't change some of your patterns, if you don't change some of your monkey mind, your negative self-talk, that you cannot heal, right? And that's the
Mm.
calm part, right? So because that isn't calm, having that,
No.
like, oh, that's so stupid. Why did you do that? Those little like mean girl thoughts that we have about ourselves. And so it was learning this work that made me recognize, that I was a perfectionist, right? That I was a pleaser, that I had frustration and disappointment because of the perfectionism, because nothing ever matched,
Mm.
kind of my expectation. So you spend a life like that, a lifetime like that, and then it adds up. And those are negative
Mm.
emotions, and those negative emotions produce the hormones of stress, and the hormones of stress ultimately cause disease.
Mm. And the thing is that we've hung on to those emotions for so long that it's very hard to change and to come to terms with those feelings and thoughts that you've carried with you for many years. So, what do you think? You run workshops, I notice. So I'd like to talk a little bit about those and what you cover when you're working with clients.
Great. Well, my in-person workshops I hold at this beautiful house that I decorated. And the hallmark program that I offer is Dr. Joe Dispenza's Change Your Mind, Create New Results program. And I think you had mentioned that I am a Neurochange Solutions consultant. So that is the certification from Dr. Joe Dispenza. So that work is based on the principle that our personality creates our personal reality, and our personality is made up of how we think, how we act, and how we feel. And so if we want to change our personal reality, right? Like we want to have health and we don't want to have stress, that means that we have to change our personality, which means that we need
Mm.
to change our thoughts, our actions, and our feelings. And so in those workshops, I set the table of that principle, and then we dive into elements of, why is it so hard to change? And we spend a whole, probably several hours on living in survival versus living in creation, so that people really begin to understand that most of us live in stress 70% of the time. And then I teach the different parts of the brain that align
Mm-hmm.
with the program. So we have the neocortex and the frontal lobe with align with our thinking brain. And then we have the limbic brain, which is sort of in the middle there, is our feeling and doing brain. And the cerebellum is the seat of our procedural memory or our habits. So that's, you go from thinking to doing to being. And that's the process of self-mastery. But there's this concept of neuroplasticity that I also teach, which is nerve cells that fire together wire together, and nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. So what we didn't know 20 odd years ago was that the brain can change neuroplasticity, and this guy Hebb proved it. And so we have to prune the synaptic connections of the thoughts, actions, and feelings that we no longer want. And we then have to replace them with the ones that we do want, create new neural pathways and
Mm.
create the new self. So it's a
Mm.
really beautiful process. So they learn all of that, but they don't leave going, that was so great. Then I do a full integration package that comes along with the work. So we meet for 30 days, not every day, but like once a week for 30 days. And they journal and they do meditation. And then usually what happens is that there's another 6-month program added on when people, because they see the results, but then they're like,
Mm.
we
Mm.
need accountability. Like, we need you to help us stay in this. And that's pretty much what I do. But when I do the retreats here, I do all the food. So I align the energetics of the food with what I'm teaching. So everybody, it's sort of like this mind, body, eating spiritual experience, and it's
mm,
delicious on
mm,
every level.
Sounds wonderful. And do you do online
Hmm.
workshops as well?
I do.
Yes.
I do the
So,
program
yeah.
virtually. I also teach another program which I call Project Possible, which is it's it's a it's a beautiful program based on the work of Mike Dooley. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's written a book called Infinite Possibilities. So it really examines a little. I say it's like the Dr. Joe program light. Like it doesn't include the science, but it talks about beliefs
Mm,
and thoughts as well, but in a different framework. So it's like kind of like a great entry level program if you don't want to
mm,
pay for the bigger program. And I also teach qigong, and so I do that in person and online.
mm,
And yeah, so it's pretty lovely to have what I say. I feel like I have this, I can open up my box, and I have, it's like, what tool do you need? And a lot of
mm,
times when clients that I'm working with one-on-one, and I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, I I prescribe them. I was like, well, your prescription for the next 2 weeks is because you're having monkey mind, so I want you to do breath work. So then I'll give them like
mm,
assigned breath work so that they could, because when you do active breath work, you have to focus. Like if you're doing a kriya or
mm,
you're doing like alternate nostril breathing or something like that, you really have to focus, right? So you can't
mm,
be
mm,
in the thoughts. So it really helps get you out of monkey mind. And so I know which tools to use when people are in different experiences with things, and if they're having trouble sleeping, like I have this in qigong, we have this one exercise, like this part of our palm is the pericardium in Chinese medicine. So I have them put their palm over their heart and then this palm over their other palm, and you just do circles. And
mm,
it is like, I mean, so you're loving yourself, first of all, right? So
mm,
your heart
mm,
to your heart to your heart. And then you just sit here. And I mean, I've given that to so many people, and they're like, they just get all like mushy and just like, like relaxed. And then I said it's way better than counting sheep. And but it's just that, so it's just having collected all of these certifications and knowledge, and I have a robust toolkit to
mm,
prescribe
mm,
to my clients. Like,
mm, mm. And so, what, for the listeners today, what are just a couple of little areas, perhaps in the love and the eat uh, components, that they can start incorporating today? Whether they might not have to heal anything, but I think we're all living in bodies that could do with some healing, and our minds as well. So, what are just a couple of points from each of those that we could start incorporating today before perhaps we come and visit you?
well, perfect. So I would suggest that each of the listeners, write down thoughts, actions, feelings, right? And so if you're feeling sad or you're feeling anxious or um, frustrated, I want you to then connect that to, what are my thoughts? What am I thinking? And maybe your thought was, today I'm going to start a diet. And then you eat a couple of cookies, right? So your action does not match your thoughts, and
Mm,
therefore your feeling is frustration. So
mm,
you can self kind of diagnose, like kind of coach yourself just with those 3 words.
mm,
So I recommend just, whenever you're sort of like, God, I'm so frustrated, or God, I'm sad, I'm feeling off, like just try to look at what your thoughts were and see if perhaps your actions did not match your thoughts.
mm. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Because most of the time with our feelings, we don't sort of deep go past what you just said, oh, I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling overwhelmed. And we don't really look at the why of it, or what we've done perhaps to make us feel that way. So I like those three words: thoughts, actions, and feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about on the eating side?
So on the
Because you do have some recipes on your website that I noticed, and you know, a lot of people are going towards the plant-based diets as well. But for me, I feel that I don't like using the word diet. I think that we need to look at a way of eating that
yeah,
is healthy, and you know, exploring all those options. So what can we do to just tweak our diet or the way we eat to make a start?
I'd say eat seasonally. So, for instance, right now it's summer, late summer here in the northeast of the United States, and there's just an abundance of beautiful vegetables coming out of the garden, right? And so, and if I connect that to Chinese medicine, the summer is the season of the heart, and the late summer is the season of the stomach. And so in the color, so think of there's red tomatoes, right? The heart, right? So it's and
Mm,
there's and now as we move into the late summer and the color is yellow, there's corn, there's yellow squash, there the beginnings of the fall squash. Um so just tune into like what's in season at the moment. And I really think
mm,
that would, and we are all nature, right? So for eating in tune with nature, we're really nourishing our bodies.
mm,
So that's what I would suggest is just, and I know a lot of people say, well, what do you do in the winter? Well, in the winter is when, you know, I mean, now we can get everything anytime, anywhere, right? So we don't
mm,
really have to
mm,
worry about that in modern society. I mean, you could get blueberries in the middle of winter, but if you wanted to eat seasonally, then it's a time to have like lentil soup or with beautiful aromatic spices that are warming, right? Because it's a cold time, so you're going to want
mm, mm,
warming spices and warming types of seasonings. So anything that would warm from the inside out. And then in spring, is usually, everybody thinks of it as the cleanse time, right? But it's the season of the liver. So in the
mm,
springtime, dandelions are what's popping out up. And so dandelion greens, dandelion tea. So I would just, if I, look up, kind of seasonal eating or what's good for the seasons and do that for yourself.
mm, mm. Well, that sounds good. Sounds interesting with the different colours related to the different seasons.
Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of our interview, and I've really enjoyed listening to you and your thoughts. And I always ask a question of my guests, but before we do, I just want to make sure: is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners today?
Well, what I'd really love to share is that it is a true belief of mine that love is the greatest frequency of all, and that it is the frequency that will heal the world, right? So when you're um, you know, thinking about the world, like stay in joy, stay in love.
Mm,
And those frequencies are so much more powerful than the opposite ones. And the more of us who can stay in these joyful, loving frequencies, the more chance that we have to see the world that I think we all want to live in, which is one full of peace and kindness and love.
mm, mm. That's a beautiful sentiment, and you're right. If we could all just live under that notion of love, loving ourselves and loving others, and being compassionate and understanding, yeah, it would be a utopia, really, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? So, before we close, Carole, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me, and I'll be putting all the links to your website and other ways that people can connect with you in the show notes. But what I want to ask you is, what does being a woman living well after 50 mean to you?
Stepping into our power. And just that I don't even, I think it's best to know that we are, we're lucky enough to be over 50, but never, I don't really think about age at this point.
No, no.
It's just, I just think about living, right? And living my
Mm,
purpose
mm,
and living maybe a little louder than I did in my past, right? In the way of what I want to see in the world, no longer um silencing or quieting my voice.
mm, mm. I love that, and it's a very good point, and I love the way that you had the answer straight away. That means that you're living that, and that's something that you really believe. So thank you again, Carole, for joining me. It's been such a pleasure to finally catch up with you and chat about your life and the work, wonderful work that you do, and all around love, eat, heal, which is, as I said in my introduction, what a wonderful way to live, and having love as that pinnacle point in the way that we live our daily lives.
Thank you so much. It was really a joy to meet you across the planet on the other side of the globe. Isn't this an amazing time that we live in?
It is, and that's what we should be looking at too. And like you, I don't really focus on the number. Obviously, I represent women over 50, but I'll be 67 next week.
Happy
And that's
birthday.
sort of, yeah, thank you. That's sort of getting on. You sort of think, oh, I'm only 3 years away from 70, but what does that really mean? I don't feel any different to what I did,
Yeah. Yeah.
yesterday or the day before. So it's all about how we live our life and making sure that we make the best of our life and take care of ourselves first, so that we can then just be able to look and be of value to others as well.
Yes, I totally agree. It's a beautiful way to live.
Hmm. Well, thanks again, Carole, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It was a real joy. Thank you.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation with Carole Murko today, and we were discussing love, eat, heal, and the power that self-love, eating well, can have in healing medical issues or mental issues, whatever we have. Now, I also like the fact of examining thoughts, actions, and feelings, writing it down in those columns, thinking about why you are feeling the way you are. So I hope that you've gathered some insight today that you can use in your life, and I encourage you to share the interview with a friend who would definitely benefit as well. That's it for another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. So until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.